God will surprise you. There are moments in life when you feel like everything is going against you, when the weight of the world is on your shoulders and you begin to doubt whether you will ever see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I want you to understand something today. God works in ways that are beyond your understanding. He is the master of surprises. He will show up when you least expect it, and he will do things for you that will blow your mind. It doesn't matter how long you've been waiting, how many times you've been knocked down, or how impossible your situation seems. God is not limited by your past, your circumstances, or your failures. He sees the bigger picture. And he has a plan for you that's far greater than anything you could ever imagine. It may seem like your dreams are slipping away, but I want to remind you that God's timing is perfect. He knows exactly when to move, and he will surprise you in ways that you can't even comprehend. Think about the people in the Bible who faced impossible odds: Joseph, Moses, Esther. They were in situations that seemed hopeless, but God turned it all around. He took their mess and made it a message. He took their setbacks and turned them into comebacks. And he can do the same for you. Don't let the setbacks define you. Don't let the waiting time break you. Keep believing, keep trusting, keep expecting. God is a God of surprises. He is not a God of mediocrity. He is a God of greatness. And he has greatness in store for you. When God shows up, he will elevate you in ways you never thought possible. He will open doors that were once closed, and he will place you in positions you thought were out of reach. The promotion, the opportunity, the blessing, it will come when you least expect it, and it will be bigger and better than you could ever imagine. So, don't be discouraged when life throws curveballs. When things aren't going as planned, remember this: God is not through with you yet. He is working behind the scenes, setting things up for your future. He is preparing you for the surprise that's about to come. So hold your head up high. Keep walking by faith. And get ready, because God is about to surprise you in ways that will exceed your expectations. Your breakthrough is coming. Stay ready for the unexpected blessings that will change your life forever. God's timing is perfect. It's something we often hear, but do we truly believe it? When we find ourselves in the midst of struggle, waiting for the breakthrough, it's easy to doubt that truth. When the dreams we've worked so hard for seem distant, or when we feel as though we've been stuck in the same place for what feels like forever. It's hard to hold on to the belief that everything will happen in due time. We want things to happen now, not tomorrow, and certainly not in the distant future. But the truth is, God's timing is never wrong. It's not based on our desires or our clock. It's based on his divine plan, which is far greater than anything we can fathom. We live in a world of instant gratification, where everything is at our fingertips. We expect answers, solutions, and rewards to come immediately, but God doesn't work that way. He isn't interested in quick fixes or temporary solutions. He's interested in doing something that will last, something that will shape us into the person we are meant to be, something that aligns with his perfect plan. He knows when we're ready, when our hearts are prepared to receive the blessings he has for us. Sometimes he holds back because he sees things that we can't. He knows what lies ahead, the challenges, the opportunities, the growth we need to experience before we can fully walk in his purpose for us. When we face delays, we often wonder why things aren't happening the way we expected. We begin to question ourselves, to question our worthiness, to question if God really cares. But in those moments of doubt, we have to remind ourselves that God sees the end from the beginning. His view is not limited by time. What may seem like a delay in our eyes is really a moment of preparation. He's not withholding blessings. He's getting us ready for something far greater than we could have imagined. When we're in the waiting season, we must trust that he's working behind the scenes, aligning people, circumstances, and opportunities in ways we can't yet see. Take a moment and think about the times when you thought things weren't going to work out. You wondered why things were taking so long, why the doors wouldn't open, why you couldn't see the way forward. But looking back now, don't you realize that those delays were the very things that helped you grow, helped you learn, and ultimately brought you to where you are today? In hindsight, you can see that God was preparing you. If you had gotten what you wanted in that moment, you wouldn't have been ready to handle it. Maybe you would have fallen short. Maybe you would have missed the lesson that strengthened your character. But because you waited, because you trusted in His perfect timing, you were ready for the blessing when it came. God knows exactly when to move. He knows when we need that push, when we need that extra ounce of strength to push through the difficult times. And He also knows when to pull back and allow us to grow through the waiting. He is not caught off guard by delays or setbacks. He is orchestrating everything in our lives to ensure we are in the right place at the right time. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean He isn't working. The very thing you've been waiting for could be just around the corner. The door could be about to open. But it's not just about the blessing, it's about you being prepared to handle it. We see the world through a limited lens, but God sees the whole picture. When we look at our current circumstances, it's easy to get discouraged, to wonder why things aren't unfolding the way we envisioned. But if we trust in God's perfect timing, we'll begin to realize that He is doing something far more powerful than we can see. We are being shaped, tested, and prepared. His delays aren't denials, they are divine moments of preparation. When God delays, it's not because He has forgotten us or because He doesn't care. It's because He is working behind the scenes, arranging things in our favor, positioning us for greater blessings than we could have ever dreamed. His timing isn't like our timing, but it's always right. He will show up at the perfect moment, not a moment too soon and not a moment too late. Trust in His timing, even when it feels like you're being held back. Trust that when the moment comes, it will be everything you need and more. God's timing is perfect, and it will always align with His perfect purpose for your life. So don't be discouraged in the waiting. Instead, rejoice, knowing that God is preparing something amazing for you. Something that will blow your mind when the time is right. God sees the bigger picture, and this is something we often fail to grasp fully. As human beings, we are limited by our own perspectives, experiences, and understanding of the world. We see life through the lens of our current circumstances, and it's difficult to imagine how everything fits into a larger plan. We focus on what's right in front of us, the problems, the struggles, the disappointments, and it can be hard to see beyond that. We get so wrapped up in our own lives and the challenges we face that we sometimes forget that God has a far broader view. What we can't see, He sees clearly, and His vision is not clouded by temporary situations or fleeting moments. God operates on a different plane. While we may be focused on what's happening today or what's missing in our lives right now, God is already thinking about our future. He's not just concerned with the immediate moment, He's concerned with the entirety of our lives. He has seen every moment before it even happens and has prepared the path for us. Where we see obstacles, He sees opportunities. Where we see dead ends, He sees new beginnings. Where we see failure, He sees the lessons that are shaping us into the people we need to become. He's working in ways we can't always understand, orchestrating events, opening doors, and creating opportunities that will lead us to the place He wants us to be. In times of difficulty, we can often feel like we're stuck in a loop, unable to move forward, trapped by circumstances beyond our control. We question why things aren't progressing or why life seems to be taking us down a path we never expected. In those moments, it's important to remember that God sees what we cannot. What may seem like a setback may actually be a setup for something greater. When Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers, when he was wrongfully imprisoned, he couldn't have known that those very experiences would position him to become second in command in Egypt. At the time, all he saw was pain, rejection, and confusion. But God saw the big picture. He knew that those difficult moments were part of the preparation for the dream He had placed in Joseph's heart. Similarly, Moses' life was a series of twists and turns, leading him from the palace to the wilderness and eventually to the place where he would lead the Israelites out of Egypt. During the years he spent in exile, he might have wondered why he was in the wilderness, far removed from the life he once knew. But God had a purpose, and while Moses couldn't see it at the time, God saw the bigger picture. He was training Moses in humility, in leadership, and in trust qualities that would be crucial for his mission. God saw that Moses needed to be in the wilderness to prepare him for the monumental task ahead. What Moses thought was a detour was actually a divine route to his destiny. The truth is, we often make decisions based on what's directly in front of us. We chase after what seems best in the moment, but God, in His wisdom, looks beyond the present. He understands the ripple effects of every decision, the consequences that will unfold years from now. When He guides us, He's not just guiding us through today's circumstances, He's leading us toward a future that He already knows. He is ordering our steps, aligning situations, and bringing people into our lives at just the right time, even if we can't see it in the moment. When things seem uncertain or unclear, we need to trust that He's working behind the scenes, connecting the dots in ways that will eventually make perfect sense. Take a moment to reflect on your life. Think about the times when you felt lost or uncertain, when you couldn't see the way forward. Perhaps it was a relationship that ended, a job you lost, or a dream that didn't materialize. At the time, it may have felt like your world was falling apart. But now, looking back, can you see how God was working things out for your good? Can you see how those challenges, though difficult, ultimately led you to something better? Sometimes what seems like a detour is actually the straight path to God's purpose for our lives. And while we are often focused on the now, God is focused on the big picture. He knows where He's taking us, even if we can't see it yet. It's not always easy to trust in God's larger perspective. When we're caught up in the struggles of life, it's hard to remember that He has a plan. But His view is not limited by time, space, or circumstance. He sees the end from the beginning. He knows the exact moment when you will break through, the exact time when everything will come together. What seems like a delay is often God's way of making sure we're fully prepared for what He has in store. He's refining us, building our character, and teaching us lessons that will be crucial for the journey ahead. In the waiting and the struggle, remember that God sees the bigger picture. He's orchestrating events, timing things perfectly, and preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. Trust in His plan, even when you don't understand it. Believe that the best is yet to come. Because while we only see pieces, God sees the masterpiece. And in His time, everything will fall into place exactly as it should. Expect the unexpected. This is a phrase we often hear, yet it is one that is challenging to truly internalize, especially when life feels predictable or when things seem to follow a particular pattern. We naturally want control over the outcomes in our lives, and we expect the future to unfold in ways that align with our plans. But the truth is, God operates in ways that we cannot always predict. His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are not like our thoughts. While we may have a vision for our lives, God's vision for us is far beyond what we can fathom. He is not confined to the boundaries of our understanding, and that's exactly why we must remain open to the possibility that God can and will surprise us. In the midst of our routines, when we've settled into a rhythm and are sure that we know what's coming next, God has a way of stepping in and turning things upside down. He will interrupt the ordinary to bring something extraordinary. When the disciples were fishing, they weren't expecting anything unusual to happen. They were simply doing their work, living out the reality of their everyday lives. Yet, in an instant, Jesus called them to follow Him and change the trajectory of their existence forever. They had no way of knowing that this seemingly simple call would lead them to become world changers. It wasn't on their radar. It was the unexpected move of God in their lives that transformed everything. Think about the many times in the Bible when people were going about their normal lives, believing they knew what would happen next, only to encounter a divine interruption. Abraham, at an old age, was told he would be the father of nations. He wasn't looking for a child, let alone a multitude of descendants. Sarah, his wife, had already accepted the fact that she was beyond childbearing years, yet God surprised them. Moses was tending sheep on the side of a mountain when he saw a burning bush that would forever change his life. David, a young shepherd, never imagined he would become a king, let alone face a giant in battle. In each of these instances, God broke into their lives in ways they never saw coming. For us, the unexpected often comes in the form of challenges, new opportunities, or even blessings we never asked for. Sometimes we pray for things and God answers in ways that are different from what we imagined. We may ask for strength and God may give us trials that strengthen our character. We may pray for patience and He may put us in situations that require us to wait longer than we'd like. We may ask for wisdom and God may lead us through a season of learning that feels uncomfortable or even painful. But these are the moments where God is working behind the scenes, aligning things in a way that will ultimately lead to the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Our expectations are often based on what we can see or what we think we deserve, but God's surprises are not bound by our understanding of what is possible. He is not limited by the constraints we place on our own lives. The doors we think are closed, He can open. The dreams we believe are impossible, He can bring to fruition. The relationships we think are over, He can restore. The breakthroughs we think we are too far from, He can deliver in ways that far exceed what we ever expected. It's in those moments that we truly see how powerful and limitless God's abilities are. He operates outside the realm of our understanding, and when He moves in ways that only He can, with results that will leave us astonished. Many of us can look back on our lives and remember moments when things didn't go according to plan. We may have felt lost, confused, or even disappointed by how things were unfolding. But then, unexpectedly, something changed. A door opened, a new opportunity appeared, or someone came into our lives who changed everything. At the time, we might not have understood how it all fit together, but looking back, we realized that God had a much better plan than we ever could have imagined. He surprised us. He made something beautiful out of what seemed like a mess. Those are the moments when we truly understand how little we control and how much we need to trust in God's ability to surprise us. We have to allow ourselves to live with an open heart and an open mind. When we limit our expectations, when we restrict God to only moving in ways that we understand or predict, we miss out on the incredible surprises He has in store. The God who created the universe, who knows the number of hairs on your head, has plans for you that go beyond anything you can imagine. Your breakthrough is often going to come when you least expect it. And it will come in a way that will take you by surprise. It will stretch your faith, challenge your assumptions, and elevate you to new levels of growth and blessing. But you must be ready. You must be open to the fact that God will surprise you, and when He does, it will be more than you ever dreamed possible. We can't put God in a box and expect Him to only work in the ways we know or expect. He is not a God of predictability. He is a God of surprises. He is always doing something new, and He will show up in ways that defy our expectations. This is why we must always be expectant, always be ready for God to move, even in the most unexpected ways. When you live with this expectation, you open yourself to the endless possibilities that come with trusting in God's limitless power. Keep your heart open to the surprises He has in store, and watch as He brings about breakthroughs, blessings, and opportunities that you never saw coming. Don't let setbacks define you. Life is filled with unexpected turns, and sometimes it feels as though everything you've worked for is slipping away. You face challenges that seem insurmountable, and with each failure you may begin to question your worth, your ability, or whether you'll ever reach the goals you've set for yourself. In those moments, it's easy to let setbacks define you, to let them determine who you are and how far you can go. But I want to remind you today, a setback is not the end of the story. It's just a part of the journey, a step on the way to something greater. We all experience setbacks in life. These moments of difficulty, disappointment, and failure are inevitable. But what truly matters is how we respond to them. Will we allow a single setback to determine our entire future, or will we rise above it, knowing that it's not the end of the road, but simply a redirection towards something better? The greatest achievers in history didn't get to where they are by avoiding setbacks. They faced them head on, learned from them, and allowed them to push them further than they ever thought possible. Consider the story of Thomas Edison, one of the greatest inventors the world has ever known. Before he invented the light bulb, he faced countless failures. Many of his experiments didn't work, and there were times when it seemed like he would never find success. Yet, he never allowed those failures to define him. Instead of giving up, he saw each failure as a lesson, a step closer to success. When asked about his many failed attempts, he famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison understood that setbacks were not signs of defeat, but signs of progress. Each failure was an opportunity to refine his approach and move closer to the breakthrough that would change the world. This is the mindset we must adopt when we face our own setbacks. Life will never go exactly as planned. There will be obstacles that challenge us, moments that knock us down, and paths that feel like dead ends. But none of these things can define who we are unless we let them. A setback is simply a moment in time, and it does not dictate your future unless you allow it to think about the many great figures in history who experienced setbacks before they achieved greatness. Walt Disney was told that he lacked creativity. Oprah Winfrey was told she was unfit for television. And Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. These individuals faced rejection, criticism, and failure, but they didn't allow it to define them. They didn't allow those setbacks to convince them that they weren't capable or that their dreams were impossible. Instead, they used those setbacks as fuel for their fire, driving them to push harder and strive for greater things. They understood that setbacks weren't a reflection of their abilities, they were simply part of the process. In our own lives, we may experience setbacks in different forms: losing a job, facing a relationship breakdown, dealing with health challenges, or seeing our dreams delayed. These events may cause us to doubt ourselves, to feel like we've been abandoned or that we'll never succeed. But when we look at these setbacks through the lens of faith and perseverance, we see them differently. We see them as opportunities for growth, moments that test our resilience and shape our character. It's in the midst of our struggles that we often find our greatest strength. Setbacks are not only tests of our resilience, but also tests of our mindset. When we face a setback, we have a choice. We can choose to give up, or we can choose to rise. We can choose to believe that this is the end of the road, or we can choose to believe that this is just a detour leading us to something better. It's all about perspective. If we allow ourselves to dwell on the negative, we will only reinforce the belief that we are defined by our struggles. But if we shift our focus and see setbacks as stepping stones, as opportunities for growth, we can overcome anything that comes our way. One of the most powerful examples of this mindset in action is the story of J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series. Before becoming one of the best-selling authors in the world, Rowling faced rejection after rejection from publishers who didn't believe in her work. She was struggling with poverty, depression, and personal challenges, but she never let those setbacks define her. Instead of giving up, she continued writing, believing that her story had value. Eventually, a publisher took a chance on her book, and the rest is history. If she had allowed those rejections to define her, the world would have never known the magic of Harry Potter. Setbacks can feel like roadblocks, but they are often the very things that prepare us for greater success. The journey to our dreams is rarely linear. It's filled with twists, turns, detours, and bumps along the way. Each setback is a part of the process, a necessary step in the refining of who we are and what we are capable of achieving. If we allow ourselves to be defined by our setbacks, we miss out on the lessons, the growth, and the breakthroughs that come from persevering through adversity. So when setbacks come, and they will remember that they do not define you, they are simply a part of the process. Use them as opportunities to grow stronger, wiser, and more determined. Embrace the challenge, knowing that every setback is just a stepping stone toward the success that is waiting for you. Keep moving forward. Don't let a momentary failure determine your future. You are not defined by your setbacks, but by your ability to rise above them. Sometimes the journey to our dreams requires us to step into the unknown. We spend so much time trying to predict every outcome, plan every step, and prepare for every eventuality. But the truth is, there are moments in life when God will ask us to take a leap of faith into something that seems uncertain, unfamiliar, and sometimes even scary. We are creatures of comfort, and the unknown feels like a place where we lose control, where we can no longer rely on the things we can see or the plans we've carefully made. Yet, it's in those very moments when we are pushed beyond the limits of our understanding that God does His most powerful work in our lives. Taking a leap of faith means stepping out of your comfort zone, trusting that there is something greater on the other side of your fears. It means leaving behind the security of what you know and embracing the possibility of what could be. It's not easy, and it's not something that comes naturally to us. We are wired to seek safety and avoid risk, but there are times in life when we must trust that God has a plan far bigger than our ability to control or comprehend. When He calls us to move forward into the unknown, it's because He knows what lies ahead, even if we don't. Think about the story of Abraham. God called him to leave everything. He knew the land, the people, the security of his home and journey into an unknown future. Abraham didn't have a map. He didn't know exactly where he was going. All he knew was that God had called him to go, and that was enough. It was a leap of faith, an act of trust in God's promise that he would lead him to a better place, even when Abraham couldn't see it. The leap wasn't easy. It wasn't without doubt or fear, but Abraham's faith allowed him to move forward, and in doing so, he became the father of nations. What if Abraham had let fear or uncertainty stop him? What if he had stayed in his comfort zone, refusing to take that leap into the unknown? He would have missed the incredible promise that God had prepared for him. Moses too was asked to take a leap of faith when God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses was reluctant, unsure of his own abilities, and afraid of what would happen if he stepped out in faith. But God reassured him, telling him that he would be with him every step of the way. Moses didn't have all the answers, and he didn't know how it would all play out, but he chose to trust God's guidance. The journey to freedom was filled with challenges, but Moses' faith in God's calling and his willingness to step into the unknown changed the destiny of a nation. In our own lives, we may face moments when God asks us to take a leap of faith. It could be stepping into a new career, starting a business, moving to a new city, or beginning a relationship that feels uncertain. The unknown can feel intimidating, and the fear of failure can hold us back. But it's in those very moments of uncertainty that we must trust God's plan. He is not asking us to leap without purpose. He is asking us to trust that he is already in the unknown, working on our behalf, preparing the way and opening doors that we cannot yet see. When we step into the unknown, we don't always have all the answers. In fact, most of the time we don't. We may not know how things will turn out, what challenges we will face, or whether we will succeed. But the beauty of taking a leap of faith is that it requires us to let go of control and trust in something bigger than ourselves. It's an act of surrender, of trusting that God is faithful and that he will lead us through whatever comes our way. Our role is not to have all the answers. Our role is to trust and obey, knowing that God is faithful to fulfill his promises. Taking a leap of faith often means embracing uncertainty, embracing the fact that we won't always know what's ahead. It requires us to trust God with the unknowns, knowing that he has already gone before us. Just as he led the Israelites through the Red Sea, he will lead us through the challenges and obstacles that lie ahead. When we step into the unknown, we must believe that God is not only with us, but he is actively guiding us, positioning us for the blessings and breakthroughs that lie ahead. Think about the moments in your life when you've taken a leap of faith. Maybe it was a decision that felt risky at the time, or maybe you were uncertain about the outcome, but looking back, you can see how God was with you every step of the way. Those are the moments when we realize that God's plans are always better than our own. When we step into the unknown with faith, he does the impossible. He opens doors, arranges opportunities, and provides in ways that we could never have imagined. The leap may have felt terrifying at first, but the rewards that follow prove that it was worth it. Taking a leap of faith doesn't mean we won't face challenges. In fact, it's often when we step out in faith that the challenges seem to grow larger. But each challenge is an opportunity to grow, to trust God more deeply, and to see his provision in action. God will not leave us in the unknown. He will walk with us through every step, guiding us, strengthening us, and showing us the way. The leap of faith is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with promise, possibility, and the hand of God leading us toward our destiny. So when God calls you to step into the unknown, don't hesitate. Trust that he has already gone before you. Trust that he knows the way even when you can't see it. Take that leap of faith, knowing that God will surprise you in ways you never imagined. It's in the unknown that we find the depth of our trust, the strength of our faith, and the unimaginable blessings that God has waiting for us on the other side. Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. We may find ourselves in situations that seem impossible, facing challenges that appear too big to overcome. These are the moments when we may feel defeated, when we question whether things will ever get better. But in these very moments of struggle, God is at work in ways that we cannot always see. He has a way of taking what seems like a setback and using it as a setup for a comeback. What may look like the end of the road can actually be the beginning of a new chapter, a new season of growth, and a greater level of victory. When we face difficulties, it's easy to believe that they will define us, that our current struggle is all we will ever know. But God doesn't work according to our limited understanding of time and circumstances. He has a plan that goes far beyond what we can see. He knows that the pain and struggle we face today are preparing us for something greater tomorrow. The trials we encounter, no matter how difficult, are part of His divine process of shaping us into who He has created us to be. Think about the story of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, and thrown into prison under false accusations. From the outside, it looked like Joseph's dreams were shattered. It seemed like everything he had worked for, every hope he had, was slipping away. But what Joseph couldn't see during those dark times was that his setbacks were actually positioning him for a comeback that would not only change his life, but also save the lives of many others. His journey from the pit to the palace was not a straight line. It was filled with struggles, hardships, and moments of doubt. Yet in the end, he stood in a place of great authority, able to help his family and his people during a time of famine. Joseph's story reminds us that God often uses our lowest points to bring about our highest victories. It's in our greatest moments of weakness that God's strength is revealed. He is a God who specializes in making a way when there seems to be no way. In our most difficult moments, He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances and preparing us for the breakthrough that is coming. But we must trust Him in the process. We must remain steadfast even when the road is long and the journey is tough. It's easy to give up when things aren't going as planned, but God is telling us that the pain we endure today is not in vain. It is part of His greater plan for our lives. The Apostle Paul, in his letters, frequently spoke of the struggles he faced: imprisonment, beatings, persecution, and constant opposition. Yet, despite these hardships, Paul understood that God's purpose for his life was greater than any obstacle he encountered. In 2 Corinthians 4:8-9, Paul writes, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." These words reflect a mindset of unwavering faith. Paul recognized that every setback was a setup for something greater. Every challenge was an opportunity for God to display His power. Every difficulty was a chance for him to grow stronger in his faith. When we face adversity, we have a choice. We can either let our challenges define us, or we can allow them to refine us. God is not interested in seeing us remain stagnant in our struggles. He wants to use those struggles to prepare us for the future He has planned. He is shaping us, molding us, and preparing us to handle the blessings He is about to pour into our lives. But that preparation often comes through difficulty. It's in the fire of adversity that our character is tested and strengthened. It's when we face opposition that we discover the depths of our resilience. God knows that we need these moments of struggle to build in the endurance, the wisdom, and the strength to handle the success and the breakthroughs He has waiting for us. In every season of difficulty, God is asking us to trust Him. He is asking us to believe that He is working even when we can't see it. It's easy to trust God when everything is going well, when our plans are unfolding as we expected. But it's in the tough times that our faith is truly tested. When everything seems to be falling apart, when the road ahead seems impossible, God is asking us to hold on. He is asking us to believe that He will turn things around. Just like He did with Joseph, He will turn our setbacks into setups for something greater. But we must trust Him in the waiting. We must trust Him when the outcome is unclear, knowing that He is faithful to fulfill His promises. The most powerful comebacks are often birthed from the most painful struggles. The greatest triumphs come after the greatest trials. It is through the setbacks that we gain the strength, the wisdom, and the perseverance needed to succeed. The process may be difficult, but the result is worth it. What we view as a setback today could very well be the launching pad for the comeback of a lifetime. God is always at work in our lives, even when we cannot see it, and He is faithful to turn every setback into a greater opportunity. The key is to keep moving forward. No matter how dark the days may seem, keep trusting, keep believing, and keep stepping forward in faith. Your comeback is coming, and it will be greater than you ever imagined. The setbacks you face today are not the end. They are just the beginning of a new season, a season where God will take you to heights you never thought possible. Stay faithful, stay hopeful, and know that God is working all things together for your good. The best is yet to come. There are moments in life when it feels like everything is falling apart. The plans we've carefully laid out, the dreams we've held onto for so long suddenly seem unreachable. We encounter disappointments, face rejection, or experience setbacks that cause us to doubt whether we'll ever achieve what we've set out to do. In those moments, it's easy to fall into despair, to feel as though we're fighting an uphill battle with no way to win. But I want to remind you today that even when things seem impossible, God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating your breakthrough in ways that you can't yet see. He specializes in surprises, and the impossible is often His specialty. The very things that seem like obstacles are often the things that God uses to position us for His purpose. We may look at the situations we face and think, there's no way this can turn around, but God is able to turn our situations completely around in a moment. He is a God of miracles, a God who specializes in making a way where there seems to be no way. When we are at the end of our own ability, that's when God shows up in ways we never imagined. Think about the story of the Israelites. They were trapped at the edge of the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army closing in on them. From a human perspective, they were in an impossible situation. The sea was in front of them, and the army was behind them. There seemed to be no escape. But in that moment, God performed one of the most miraculous acts in history. He parted the Red Sea, allowing the Israelites to walk through on dry land, and then caused the sea to swallow up Pharaoh's army as they pursued. What seemed like an insurmountable obstacle was simply a setup for one of God's greatest displays of power. He turned the impossible into a testimony of His faithfulness. The same God who parted the Red Sea is the same God who is working in your life today. You may find yourself in a situation that feels impossible, but remember, with God, all things are possible. You may not see the way out, but God is already at work, making a way where you see none. He knows exactly what you need and when you need it, and He has a plan that goes beyond your understanding. When you're in the midst of a difficult situation, remember that God has a track record of turning impossible circumstances into powerful testimonies. We often get caught up in trying to figure things out on our own. We try to control every detail, plan every move, and predict every outcome. But sometimes God allows us to reach a point where our plans fall apart so that we can truly rely on Him. It's when we have no other options left that we realize we need to trust Him completely. And that's when God works in ways that we could never have imagined. He's not bound by our understanding or our limitations. He operates outside the box, and He often works in ways that surprise us. What seems impossible to us is nothing for God. There are countless examples in the Bible where God made the impossible possible. Look at Sarah, who gave birth to Isaac at the age of 90. In the natural, it seemed impossible. Her body was beyond the age of childbearing, and yet God made a way. He told Abraham and Sarah that they would have a child, even though they had no reason to believe it was possible. But they trusted God, and in His perfect timing, Sarah gave birth to Isaac. It was a miracle. It was a promise fulfilled against all odds. What looked impossible to the world was a simple matter for God. In our own lives, we may face situations that seem impossible, whether it's a financial struggle, a health crisis, a relationship issue, or a dream that feels too far out of reach. But when we place our trust in God, He has a way of turning the impossible into something beautiful. God doesn't need our help to perform miracles. He simply asks us to trust Him and believe that He can do what we cannot. When we release our doubts and allow Him to work in His own way and timing, He will often surprise us in ways we could never have predicted. This doesn't mean that everything will always go according to our timeline, or that we will always understand why things happen the way they do. But it does mean that we serve a God who is always at work on our behalf, orchestrating every detail of our lives for his glory and our good. Even when it seems like there is no way forward, God is making a way. He is always on time, and he will never leave us or forsake us. He's working behind the scenes, turning our impossible situations into opportunities for him to show his greatness. Sometimes God uses the impossible to reveal his power in ways that we can't fully comprehend. It's in those moments when we feel helpless that his strength is made perfect. When we are weak, he is strong. And often it's when we are at our lowest, when we can see no way out, that God shows up with a solution that exceeds our expectations. What we thought was the end of the road is often the place where God does his greatest work. He takes our brokenness and turns it into something greater than we could have ever imagined. If you're facing something that seems impossible today, I encourage you to hold on to faith. Trust that God has not forgotten you. He is working behind the scenes, preparing to surprise you in ways that will leave you in awe. He is the God who specializes in the impossible. What you think is an obstacle is simply an opportunity for God to show his glory. Keep believing, keep trusting, and know that your breakthrough is on the way. God will surprise you, and it will be more than worth the wait. There are seasons in life when we feel like we are waiting for something, waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for a breakthrough, waiting for a breakthrough, waiting for a promise to be fulfilled. It's during these seasons of waiting that many of us begin to feel discouraged, as though the answer is never coming, or that the waiting itself is a sign that we're being overlooked. But what if the waiting is not a delay, but rather a divine setup for something bigger than we could ever imagine? What if in the waiting, God is not only preparing us, but also preparing the breakthrough for us in ways that we cannot yet see? When you find yourself waiting for something you've prayed for, it's important to remember that God's timing is not like our timing. We live in a world where we are conditioned to expect instant results. Technology gives us instant answers. Food is delivered to our doorsteps with the push of a button, and even information is accessible in seconds. This has created a mindset where we believe that if we want something, we should have it immediately. But God doesn't work according to our timeline. His timing is perfect, and his delays are not denials. When we are in a season of waiting, it's easy to get impatient. But this is the moment when we must remind ourselves that God's plans for us are far greater than anything we could rush into. There are numerous examples throughout the Bible of people who had to wait sometimes for years before they saw the fulfillment of God's promises. Think about Abraham, who waited 25 years for the son God promised him. During those years, Abraham faced trials, struggles, and moments of doubt. There were times when he wondered if the promise was ever going to come to pass. But in the fullness of time, God fulfilled his promise to Abraham in a way that only he could. It was a promise that seemed impossible from a human perspective, yet God's timing was perfect. Abraham didn't receive the child when he wanted, but when the promise was fully realized, it was a miracle. Through his waiting, Abraham's faith was refined and strengthened, and he became the father of many nations. Joseph's story is another powerful example. He was given a dream as a young man, a dream that one day he would rise to a position of great authority. Yet after receiving this dream, Joseph went through years of hardship, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. For years, Joseph waited. During this time, it may have seemed like the dream was nothing but a distant memory. Yet, in the right moment, God moved in a way that was beyond Joseph's understanding. From the prison, he was brought to a position of power, and he was able to fulfill the dream God had given him. But it was the waiting, the testing, and the refining of Joseph's character during those years that prepared him to handle the greatness God had in store. God's timing was perfect, even when it seemed like Joseph's dream would never come true. Sometimes the waiting period is not about God withholding something from us, but about him preparing us for what he has in store. If God were to give us what we want immediately, we may not be ready to handle it. Waiting allows God to shape us, strengthen our character, and prepare our hearts for the breakthrough. He's not only preparing the breakthrough itself, but also preparing us for it. If we rush ahead, we may miss the lessons, the growth, and the transformation that are necessary for us to fully experience and appreciate what's to come. Think about a seed. A seed doesn't grow overnight. It has to be planted in the soil, watered, and given time to sprout. During the waiting period, there is growth happening beneath the surface that we cannot see. If we dug up the seed in the middle of the process, we would destroy the potential it has to grow into something beautiful. Similarly, in our lives, there are things happening behind the scenes while we wait. God is working in ways that we cannot yet understand, preparing the soil of our hearts, teaching us patience and building our faith so that when the time comes for our breakthrough, we will be ready to receive it. The process of waiting is not meant to be easy. It's meant to develop us. During the waiting period, there may be times when doubt creeps in, when frustration builds up, and when it feels like God is silent. But even in those moments, God is present. He is working in the waiting. He's teaching us to trust, to lean into His promises, and to rely on His faithfulness. It's in the waiting that we learn to hold on to His word, to trust in His goodness, and to believe that His promises are yes and amen. The waiting doesn't mean that God has forgotten us. It means that He is preparing something greater than we could ever imagine. Think about a seed. A seed doesn't grow overnight. It has to be planted in the soil, watered, and given time to sprout. During the waiting period, there is growth happening beneath the surface that we cannot see. If we dug up the seed in the middle of the process, we would destroy the potential it has to grow into something beautiful. Similarly, in our lives, there are things happening behind the scenes while we wait. God is working in ways that we cannot yet understand, preparing the soil of our hearts, teaching us patience and building our faith so that when the time comes for our breakthrough, we will be ready to receive it. The process of waiting is not meant to be easy. It's meant to develop us. During the waiting period, there may be times when doubt creeps in, when frustration builds up, and when it feels like God is silent. But even in those moments, God is present. He is working in the waiting. He's teaching us to trust, to lean into His promises, and to rely on His faithfulness. It's in the waiting that we learn to hold on to His word, to trust in His goodness, and to believe that His promises are yes and amen. The waiting doesn't mean that God has forgotten us. It means that He is preparing something greater than we could ever imagine. Thank you.